Hiya.
Hello, mister.
Don't you want to record your podcast?
Oh, I don't know. My mom always told me I shouldn't record podcasts with strangers.
Well, that's very wise of your mother. Very wise indeed. I am Pennywise, the dancing clown, and you are Georgie. Now we're not strangers, are we?
I guess not.
You want to record with me, don't you, Georgie? Of course you do. There's cotton candy, rides, all sorts of surprises down here. And balloons, too. All colors.
Do they float?
Oh, yes. They float, Georgie. They float. And when you're down here with me, you'll float too.
Welcome to Watch, Review, Repeat. This is the podcast where two best friends discuss the latest in film and television and then do it all over again the following week. My name is Colton Brown, and joining me is my best friend, Andrew Meadows.
How you doing?
Good. Had a brief encounter with Pennywise the Dancing Clown. He's here recording the podcast with us.
Our first featured guest?
We're talking It this week, so who better to join us than It himself, or itself, I suppose. So we're recording a bit early this week because Florida is about to get swallowed by a massive hurricane with the worst name in the world.
Irma.
I think she's going to hit both of us eventually. We're hoping that she'll die down in strength, but we're kind of doing this early, and we might even have this out earlier than our usual release schedule because we might be without power for a good amount of time, and that is not going to be very much fun. So we kind of modified our schedule. We saw it. Both of us saw it last night, opening night.
And the theater was full, too.
Mine was crazy packed. I actually went to two different theaters, as it turned out. The first one I went to, by the time I went up to the box office, it was sold out. So I kind of had to turn around with my tail tucked between my legs and drive down to another theater. So I made it in eventually. But we'll go ahead and start with our usual cycle of news. I think probably the biggest story that's come out this week, Star Wars Episode 9 has lost its director. Now, on StarWars.com, there was a statement released. Basically, it says, Lucasfilm and Colin Trevorrow have mutually chosen to part ways on Star Wars Episode 9. Colin has been a wonderful collaborator throughout the development process, but we have all come to the conclusion that our visions for the project differ. We wish Colin the best, and we'll be sharing more information about the film soon.
In other words, he got his ass fired.
Well, this is not the first time that a Star Wars director has been fired, so it kind of seems like Lucasfilm's a bit of a tumultuous place to work at. I guess most recently, the Han Solo directors got booted halfway through production and replaced by Ron Howard. A little bit less publicized, Josh Trank was tranking about on Fantastic Four and got himself fired from a possible Boba Fett spinoff movie, which was never officially announced. But the difference, I think, with this announcement, as far as Trevorrow departing Episode 9, is that this was met with uproarious applause, because basically everyone has been hankering for this dude to get booted off the project for a while. I mean, we kind of spoke about this a little bit earlier off the podcast. You're, I guess, a little unfamiliar with Colin Trevorrow. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I didn't immediately recognize his name.
Yeah, so I mean, this guy is somehow just shot to like A-list Hollywood director level. Like, he did a tiny movie called Safety Not Guaranteed, it's pretty solid, and then boom, he does Jurassic World, which sets the box office on fire. And I think it's probably not wholly well received. I enjoyed it, but it's not a good movie. It's not a terribly well written movie.
It just took advantage of an established IP.
Right. And then he turned around and did The Book of Henry this year, 2017, which just got absolutely horrendous reviews.
Do you think that was, in your opinion, do you think that's the catalyst for him getting fired?
I don't think so. I don't think that Lucasfilm is going to concern themselves too much with the actual quality of a movie. There's many things that kind of go into making a movie, and sometimes it's not all on the director. whether or not that's the case for the Book of Henry, I can't vouch for personally, but I think that based on the wording of this, it kind of sounds like there was some creative differences. I mean, that's the usually cited reason when people depart, but I mean, it says our visions for the project differ. So I think that
you think Homeboy was a little too assertive in his points of view.
It's possible. I also wonder, and I'm not the first person to speculate this, but I actually think Kathleen Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm, had actually kind of basically said that Episode 7, The Force Awakens, was Han's movie. Episode 8, The Last Jedi, is Luke's movie. And then Episode 9 would have been Leia's movie. And of course, Carrie Fisher passed away. And so clearly things have had to change since then. So part of me wonders if the creative differences, the differing visions here probably may have involved kind of the legacy of Leia's character and kind of how to handle that going forward. And to be fair, again, this is all purely speculation, but yeah, I mean, that could be a tough nut to crack.
Absolutely. For anybody.
Right. So nothing personal against Trevorrow. I'm okay with this personally, because I think that this invites an opportunity to bring in a far more talented director, which kind of brings me to see if there's any director that you would be interested in taking on Star Wars Episode 9.
I have a lot of directors that I really like. Darren Aronofsky, you have, Guillermo del Toro, and just it's just a little bit more intrinsic artsy directors. I don't necessarily think that they're the right people for Star Wars. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
So I find I would not recommend Michael Bay. I can think of plenty of people I wouldn't recommend doing it. You know what I mean? But
sure, yeah.
But as far as finding the right person for it, it's definitely a tough thing to do. I wouldn't mind if they just said, "Hey, listen, Ryan, you want to direct the next one?"
Yeah, bring Rian Johnson back. Yeah, I mean, by all indications, Last Jedi, Rian Johnson has kind of been on the record basically saying that the creative process behind Episode 8 is they basically gave him free reign, and then what he came up with, he went to them and they said, "We love this." So. It seems like Rian Johnson kind of knows what he's doing, and it seems like Lucasfilm is obviously very okay with kind of the vision that he brought to the table. So you would think that would kind of be the obvious thing to do, is to just sign him up and bring him back for Episode 9. Of course, we say that without having seen Episode 8.
That's true, but he clearly, well, I can't say clearly because we haven't seen the movie, but he appears to understand Star Wars. That's the way he comes off.
Right.
And then based off of his previous movies, he's a very visionary director. You know what I mean? So he kind of walks that balance of understanding the IP and well, not necessarily the IP, we don't know, but he's creative and visionary but he still can make a blockbuster movie. You know what I mean? He's not artsy to the point where his views are polarized. So I mean, we haven't seen it yet, but I don't think I would mind having him direct another one. But as far as recommendations, though, it's hard to drum one up. I can't. Do you have anybody in particular that you would like to see direct it?
Yeah, I mean, it is a tough question, because it's like you said, there are so many directors that are extremely talented, and you wonder how well their visions would mesh with Star Wars. I mean, J.J. Abrams, I think he was a good choice for The Force Awakens. I mean, basically bringing the franchise back up to speed from where it was. So I don't know that I'd want to see him come back, because I kind of feel like now that he's set the table, it makes more sense for other people to kind of bring their own talent and vision to it. Well, obviously still working in a way that is cohesive with obviously what Lucasfilm is at least, thinking about. Maybe Ron Howard might be still available after he's done with Han Solo, or old Georgie himself could come back.
Yeah, old Georgie. I would not want that.
Spielberg? I mean, I think that Spielberg is inconsistent these days, but I think there's no denying. I mean, he's definitely very heavily tied into the hierarchy that exists at Lucasfilm. So, and him and George Lucas have been creative collaborators for many decades now. Yeah. So, I like seeing kind of I guess, unexpected choices. I think Rian Johnson's an unexpected choice for episode 8, and you can kind of see it in the choices that we've seen in the trailers and the marketing and stuff. There's things in there that are kind of just like, I mean, calling it The Last Jedi, and it's time for the Jedi to end. It's such. I mean, the first time we saw it at Star Wars Celebration, I was kind of just like, oh, shit, I don't even what, huh? But now, I've kind of wrapped my head around it. I'm like, okay, this could be a very cool take on it. And again, we haven't seen the movie. It could be terrible. Could be, episode 2 all over again. But it seems like he's brought a very unique, interesting vision. So I think that's probably what they have to single out. And if it means bringing Rian Johnson back to just finish his vision, I'm definitely down with that. So. Let's keep this going. We got to look at Rami Malek in Bohemian Rhapsody. So this is a biopic about Freddie Mercury, lead singer of Queen. This is directed by Bryan Singer of largely X-Men fame. He did X-Men 1, 2, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse. Yeah, that one was shit, and he did that one. He's done a couple other things. Valkyrie, Usual Suspects. So, I mean, he's got a pretty extensive filmography, mostly good across the board, I would say. So, I mean, what did you kind of think about this picture that we got?
It's strikingly identical to Freddie Mercury. It's very bizarre how close it looks to Freddie Mercury. I thought.
Yeah, I agree, because Rami Malek doesn't really look like Freddie Mercury, I wouldn't say. I mean, for a long time, I think this has kind of been a long gestating project. Sacha Baron Cohen was attached to this at one point, and Sacha Baron Cohen is almost a dead ringer sometimes for Freddie Mercury.
No, sure, absolutely.
So there were some creative differences that kind of led to him departing the project. So I don't know how much of that project is still intact in this. I think that the issue they ran in with that previous iteration was that the remaining band members of Queen wanted it to kind of focus on Queen surviving Freddie Mercury's death. So Queen, yeah, I mean, Queen is still around these days, but Queen was Freddie. Freddie is Queen.
Absolutely. I mean, we might get some disrespect on that, but I don't know, man.
I mean, and it's not to disrespect the band members of Queen, who I'm sure are listening to this and are very offended.
If you happen to be a band member from Queen, be sure to reach out to us with hate. I would
watchreviewrepeat at gmail.com. Send us all your hate mail. We'll read it live on air next time. Waiting for it. We're waiting for it.
Holding our breath.
Anyway, I'm curious to see if this movie is kind of going to be more akin to what made Cohen balk and leave. And so from the picture, he looks good. It looks accurate, but that's literally all we have to go off with this movie so far, other than kind of who is involved. And Rami Malek is fantastic in Mr. Robot, so I'm sure he's going to crush it. And Bryan Singer is usually a talented director, so there's a recipe for success here. But I do wonder how much potential behind the scenes meddling could be potentially catastrophic for the overall quality.
Sure. Did you happen to see Gavin O'Connor is set to write and direct Suicide Squad 2?
Oh, thank God. Are we going to get more Jared Leto? Oh, man. We got a Joker and a Harley Quinn movie. Now we're getting Suicide Squad 2. DC, they are just killing it, man.
They're kicking them out for sure. Now, I will admit, I haven't seen any Gavin O'Connor movies. I was intrigued by The Accountant, but I haven't seen it. And I did not see The Warrior. I heard good things about The Warrior, though.
I actually have not seen either of those movies that you mentioned, which I think are probably the two most notable movies on his resume. The Accountant, I heard very mixed things about, and Warrior, I definitely heard very good things about. I think that's been sitting in my Netflix queue for like ever. Like it's probably not even on Netflix anymore. That's how long it's been sitting in there. So I mean, this is an upgrade over David Ayer, right? Like maybe if they give him like, hey man, I'm not going to push my luck. If they just give him like maybe 2 months to write the script, like that's twice the amount of time. Maybe they can double the quality by that standard. So it'll go from a 2 out of 10 to a 4 out of 10. Now we're talking like, all right, it's kind of in the mediocre territory.
Or at least entertaining enough to where it's laughable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not Inhumans-esque, if you will.
Yeah. God damn. man. Suicide Squad was bad. God, it was terrible. God, it was fucking terrible. Anyways, that's enough of that.
Let's say it's enough. We've said there all is to be said about Suicide Squad. I'm sure we'll be back for number 2, and we'll probably hate it too. So, yep, there's that. Moving on. Drew Goddard is attached to write and direct an X-Force movie that will be featuring Deadpool.
Now, what was his attachment to Cabin in the Woods? Did he direct that?
Drew Goddard wrote and directed Cabin in the Woods. He's got a pretty impressive resume and a pretty impressive almost resume as well. So he wrote and directed Cabin in the Woods. He wrote the screenplay of The Martian. He didn't write the book. But he wrote that. He was supposed to direct it, but ended up not doing it. Ended up being directed by old man Ridley Scott. He was
also the producer of The Martian and producer of 10 Cloverfield Lane, which was fantastic.
Yeah, and he was the original showrunner on Daredevil, the Netflix show. I believe he ended up dropping out, I think, to go work for Sony on their Amazing Spider-Man cinematic universe, which kind of ended up being a huge flop after Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a huge pile of shit. But he was at one point attached to do a Sinister Six movie. To write and direct that, and that got scrapped along with the Aunt May movie and a couple other choices.
They were gonna make an Aunt May movie.
Hey man, she was gonna be a super spy, and it was gonna be real good.
You're full of shit. There's no way they were gonna do that.
Look it up.
No way.
Check the Google. The Google has the receipts.
Oh man. Oh.
So I guess Goddard is apparently. I think he's contributing to the screenplay on Deadpool too, so I guess it kind of makes sense that he would continue with the character. I mean, it's a good choice. Everything that he has actually done has turned out pretty good. He wrote on Buffy and Angel, so by all accounts, this seems to be a pretty good get, I would say.
I'm game for any movie this guy writes. Cabin in the Woods was, I think it's probably one of my favorite horror movies. I mean, speaking of horror, let's transition into it.
Oh, you want to talk about It with Pennywise the Dancing Clown?
Yeah, I just want to talk about it. I just want to talk about it. It's a breath of fresh air in horror movies that seem to... Do you ever notice that there's a similar trope with horror movies that every year 2 or 3 like teenage horror movies come out, and very seldom do we get just a good solid horror movie. You know what I mean?
Yes, good horror is way too far and few between.
And this really, I mean, I was very impressed. It's for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, it's about a group of quote unquote losers. They're bullied kids, and they band together when a monster starts killing children.
He starts picking off children in this little tiny town called Derry in Maine.
Right. It's very good. Very good movie. It was originally a Stephen King book, and then it was picked up as a miniseries, 2-part miniseries in the 90s with Tim Curry. Tim Curry played it, and if you haven't seen the miniseries, I don't know how it holds up. You would know better than I would because you refreshed yourself on it, if I'm not mistaken.
I did.
Did it hold up?
Yes and no. I think for what it is, for the time period, I think it holds up pretty admirably. It's got definitely some issues. There's certain things that haven't aged well about it, but I think the elements that worked best in the source material shine in that. And I think the restrictions imposed upon being on TV, so a lot of the adult content is kind of stripped.
Limited budget.
Yes, certainly the budget is also very, very limited. So I think that it's held back by those elements, but I think that what it can, what it can do with what it has, it does do well. And of course, Tim Curry as Pennywise is still, to me, one of the most iconic horror performances of all time.
Absolutely.
So, I think that if there's nothing else that sticks with you from the miniseries, he's kind of the one thing that is the standout from that.
Now, let me ask you this: before we segue into all the other things associated with the new movie, I'm curious about the just the overall adventure feel. Is it there in the original movie?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think that. And I'll kind of talk about this a little bit more extensively later. I think that it's natural for kids. I think they're 10, 11, 12, kind of in both the miniseries and the movie we're going to talk about. It's natural for kids like that to really kind of bond with each other. And so it definitely has this nice touching story of these kids, these kind of misfits. They're bullied. Each one of them kind of has, issues of their own. They kind of find each other and are able to kind of, grow together. And obviously the kind of impetus for that through both of these iterations is it, Pennywise and the many forms he takes. But at the core, it's a story of these kids really kind of learning to understand each other, understand themselves, and mature.
And the biggest point of it, in my opinion, is overcoming fear. So it's really at its core, it embodies it's a very good story. Yes, it's a horror movie. Yes, it's got a super crazy character for a villain and everything else. But at its core, it's about a group of kids overcoming fears. And I think it's a really good story. I don't know. I really like it. I like the original one, and I like the new one a lot.
Well, you know who else likes it?
Everybody, apparently.
Well, let's say you mentioned that your place was packed. I said I had to go to 2 separate theaters. I checked the numbers on this. This thing made $13.5 million on the Thursday night grosses alone. So, I mean, the Thursday nights don't start until 7 p.m., and the theater I was at was literally running at every half hour up until midnight. So, for the record, that's the highest Thursday gross for a rated R movie ever, topping Deadpool.
That's amazing.
Of all things. Right now, it's tracking for $80 to $90 million, possibly more. It might even cross the $100 million threshold.
But you ain't getting any money from Florida, bitch.
Yeah, that's to say that's kind of the big if right now is if people are crazy enough to adventure out and hurricane weather to see it. So far, yes, given that it hasn't struck us yet, but I think that when it does have its impacts, that'll probably cut into the box office receipts a bit. But nonetheless, this thing's going to be the biggest horror movie opening ever and the biggest September opening ever, regardless of kind of where it's just set up for that alone, and well deserved, really, because I think that there's kind of been a dearth of movies like this. Am I wrong in saying that? I think you kind of were alluding to that earlier.
Yeah, every year we get a movie about, hey, I'm an attractive female and I get a text message from some creeper, or I'm possessed, or whatever. They all seem the same. You know what I mean? And they're just all. I'm not compelled to go out and see them. Yeah. Just because they all look, feel, sound the same. And this is definitely it's definitely a different take, and it's fresh. And it's on a familiar IP, which is cool. It's definitely refreshing to have a good horror movie because we very seldom get them.
So, I mean, you mentioned this is a familiar IP. And neither of us has actually read the book. That's my understanding. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, I haven't read that book.
Okay, it's a very, very large novel. I think it's over 1,000 pages. But I do have some familiarity with the novel. Been listening to a podcast called Ink to Film lately. They just started. Basically, their whole conceit is they're going to read a book of something that's going to be adapted to film, and then they'll watch the film and compare it. And so it was such a massive undertaking that they've split it into multiple episodes. So I've been listening to the episodes kind of over the past month or so since they've kind of been putting these out. So I've been kind of gradually consuming basically a very abridged audiobook version of the novel. So I have a little bit more frame of reference for certain things that have happened in the miniseries, things that happened in this 2017 movie. So I do have, I feel like, a little bit of insight. Unfortunately, I've been racking my brain with so much it material that I'm kind of just like, wait, did that happen in this? Was that the book? I don't remember this. So if I jumble things up, like if I start talking about shit and you're like, that didn't happen. What are you talking about?
I'll certainly correct you.
Yeah. So I've been inundating with myself with the it material. I'm kind of just like, shit, maybe I should read the book, but I suck at reading, first of all, and 1,000+ page novel is quite daunting. But maybe with a potential upcoming power outage, I might have nothing else to do but hang out with my Kindle for a good extensive period of time. We'll see. But anyway, I digress. I think that we should probably talk about the star of the show, Pennywise the Dancing Clown. We'll be covering non-spoilers, and then we'll get a little bit more spoilerific, and we'll clearly mark when we do so. But just from a non-spoiler standpoint, I'm curious to see. I mean, you say I mentioned that Tim Curry's Pennywise is so iconic. We got Bill Skarsgård stepping into the shoes of Pennywise the Dancing Clown, and how did you feel about his performance here?
It's drastically different. It's drastically different than Tim Curry. Tim Curry played, in my opinion, a much more clown-esque character, where Bill Skarsgård played more of a, yes, he looked like a clown, but it was very much a demonic-looking son of a bitch. I mean, there was not much else other than his face paint and his smile that were clown-like. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think part of that is kind of the restriction of the medium. Although I say I don't. This is kind of one of those things I don't know. I don't have a good grasp on exactly how he's portrayed in the source material. I think that he's a little bit closer to kind of what we get in the 1990 miniseries, where he's a little bit more, I guess, reserved or docile. Whereas in the movie that we get, he seems very unhinged. He seems like a malevolent being of pure evil. Like he doesn't seem to be someone that is a mental threat. He seems like much more of a physical,
absolutely
more capable creature. Where he's more about, they're both about terrifying you. But I feel like from what I saw of the 90 miniseries and kind of what I've heard from about the book, it kind of seems like he's more about getting inside your head and then kind of making you unnerve yourself. Whereas this version of Pennywise is.
He's going to come out and get you.
He's coming out. He's got like some buck teeth. He starts talking to you in weird kind of drawl, and he starts drooling everywhere, and he's kind of contorting his body in unnatural ways, and just the way that he looks and moves. There's just such a.
It's very unsettling.
It's extremely unsettling. Yeah. That's exactly that's the word I wanted to find, but I couldn't get to.
He does a good job. He does a good job, and it's almost the best way I can point it to is we have a dark Superman. You know what I mean? For whatever reason, and it's almost it's more fit for the time that we're at. You know what I mean? It seems like every movie that comes out is dark in tone, and it almost fits into that groove where we're getting an output of constant dark movies and everything else, where this clown is very, he looks like a clown. He looks like a Victorian era clown too. His clothes and everything are just, they're old. You know what I mean? So the being is whatever it is, or whenever it started. It started a long time ago where they dressed a little bit different, I guess, and that's the way I look at it anyways. But he does a good job of personifying the character, and it does a good job of taking that character and implementing it into the themes and the visual style of the rest of the movie. It wasn't out of place, and it was, I don't know, I was very satisfied with it, personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what made his interpretation work so well is that he didn't try to copy what Tim Curry did. I mean, it's a very different, much more violent, I would say, version of Pennywise than we previously saw on film.
It's almost like Bill Skarsgård watched it when he was a kid and acted like he thought it was. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know that. I like I said, I haven't seen it in a long time, the original one. But it terrified the shit out of me. There was nothing clown-like about that character. You know what I mean? It's very scary. But then you go back and you look at little clips and this, that, and the other, and that dude was acting like a clown. Tim Curry was acting like a legitimate clown. You know what I mean? Most of the time. So I don't know.
Yeah, to say. I mean, the nice thing is, I mean, obviously, there's always going to be a comparison drawn between these, but I think there's such a divide between the two that you don't have to pick one or the other. I think they're so different from each other that they work in their own right. And certainly, I think I kind of said before, what Tim Curry does in the miniseries is much more appropriate for the level of production and the style that they were going for, whereas this definitely leans into kind of what you're saying, that the darker. It's definitely a much more adult, I'd say, themed and to kind of escalate Pennywise into this being of pure evil and malice. I think that's very fitting. So, yeah, I think I was pleased with what he did, and I have to admit, I wasn't sure how I'd respond to him. I think kind of initially when we see him, I wasn't
You
sure.
talking about promo pictures and stuff?
No, within the movie itself, just kind of the first kind of real dialogue that we see with him.
I tell you what my point was. I don't mean to cut you off. But when I saw the promo art, I was like, I don't know. It can go either way. You know what I mean? That's not really how I would have brought it back. You know what I mean? But the whole scene with
Georgie,
yes. What the fuck? How did I forget that?
I don't know. I mean, we just
the whole scene with Georgie. He's asking for the boat and he's talking to him and everything else, and there's a brief period where Pennywise, he just kind of drones out. You know what I mean? He's talking and then all of a sudden he zones out and he just starts drooling, and he starts his whole face changed.
Right.
And instantly I was like, this guy's gonna nail it. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, because up until that point, it kind of seemed like it wasn't a version of what Tim Curry was doing, but it was in line with it enough that I was kind of just like, I don't. The delivery here just seems kind of awkward, and then it kind of goes into this different direction. I was like, okay, all right, I'm seeing what's going on here, and then it goes in a very different direction.
We'll go into that spoiler territory here in a little bit.
But yeah. I think I agree. That's definitely a point, and the way that he's lit, and just obviously there's differences in the facial makeup and everything too. But the way he's lit in that sewer drain, the eyes are just kind of very lit and very expressive. And
kudos to that director of cinematography.
Yeah. I mean, big shout out to Chung Hoon Chung, cinematographer on this, because this movie looks fucking incredible.
It looks beautiful.
I think that's probably one of the big things that I came away from this movie thinking, oh, I did not expect them to really nail it in that way. Because I think that horror movies, like you said, very often kind of have the samey feel, a samey look to them, and this didn't. I mean, it just, the style of it, in terms of the cinematography, was just astounding.
The aside from the cinematography, I mean, there's more technical aspects that are definitely worth noting, but something I wanted to touch on that I miss, something that I really enjoy, is that whole coming of age feel of a movie, or not even necessarily coming of age, just that sense of adventure.
Mm-hmm. I think that this movie nailed that, and I think that's where this movie shines. I think that these cast of kids that they brought together are all extremely talented kids, and you walk a fine line with child actors, I always say, because you can, it's a tough thing. I mean, acting's a tough business, and to find kids that are really age appropriate as they did here, to find kids that really can embody their characters in the way that they did, and to really feel like I 100% believe that these kids are probably hanging out off screen and having a good old time, like, or when they're on set and they're not filming. Like, these kids are, you think about most adult actors and they're probably just like, whatever, I go back to my adult life and do whatever. But these kids are probably just having the time of their lives on this set, and you can tell. You can tell these kids really responded to each other in the way that obviously that they did in the story, but moreover also, I mean, you can just see that the natural chemistry that a lot of these kids bring to the table, and I think that that's where that shines, because you get these naturally talented actors with natural chemistry, and then you put them in a story that really excels and telling this story and weaving it with, yes, these elements of horror to bring them out, bring them together. But the moments that we see of these kids spending time together, doing whatever kids do, like,
and trying to figure this shit out. You know what I mean? They have this super big problem, and yeah, the coming of age thing is definitely worth noting because it's enjoyable to watch. I mean, everybody can associate themselves with it. On a side note, shout out to Finn. He was great. Finn was great, and Jeremy Taylor, who plays Ben. He was definitely one of my favorite characters. He was good too. But I mean, kudos to them all. Really, they're very all talented.
Like I said, they were all good. And really the only, I guess the problem, and it's not so much a problem, but it's just one of those things when you have effectively 7 principal characters, is that some of them get sidelined. So you mentioned Jeremy as Ben. He's good. Finn Wolfhard, who plays Richie, like he steals the show, definitely. The Jade Lieberher kid plays Bill. He's great. Sophia Lillis, who plays Bev, she's
also
fantastic.
Great.
I mean, I think I think for my money, I think she was probably the best of the bunch. But she's also probably one of the most well-rounded characters as well. Whereas someone like Mike Hanlon, Chosen Jacobs, is the kid that plays him, and nothing wrong with his performance. He's good, but there's nothing for his character to do in the movie, and I think that's kind of a shame. Is when you run into that.
Same thing with Stanley.
Yeah.
Stanley got touched on a little bit more. I mean, probably just about the same as Mike. I thought they were pretty equivalent, but there wasn't a whole lot there.
Right. I mean, it was obvious that they chose to focus on these other characters in favor of some of the other characters. So it's just one of those things where, like I said, it's hard to balance so many characters, especially in what is a 2-hour movie. It's one thing to characterize them all in a 1,000+ page novel. It's another thing entirely to kind of condense that characterization and also weave it within a plot and in a satisfying manner, and something that's, I mean, I think this is over 2 hours, but it's still, I mean, movies are, it's such a different medium that you have to adapt it in a way that you maximize what you can maximize, and some things do end up falling by the wayside. I think something like Mike's characterization is something that does fall by the wayside, and it's not bad in any way. It's just one of those things where we kind of could have done something. Even I thought the bullies, they kind of almost felt like a side note. Whereas, in my experience from kind of listening to Ink to Film, and also the miniseries, they have a pretty big role to play, and there's a lot of depth given to these characters in the books that obviously it's very hard to adapt, like I said, when you have such a time crunch as you do in a movie. But we see elements of it. We see elements of them kind of getting a little bit of development here and there, but I don't know that it really kind of pays off, I think, in the way that it could. So again, and that's just the thin line that you kind of have to walk on. So you got to focus on things and de-emphasize other things. And I think that what they did choose to focus on, they succeeded with flying colors at doing so. So, and honestly, I think I think the only one of the few things that I thought they were good, but I think that a lot of the horror aspects, I kind of felt there was an overemphasis on jump scares and stuff like that, which is much more of a modern horror trope than it ever was back in the original miniseries when that came out in 1990. So it did kind of lean into, I think, some of the modern horror tropes. Not always. It did it at times, and that was kind of was just like, I've seen this before. The audience was having a cow, I'll tell you that. I don't know how yours was reacting, but mine was losing their fucking shit like throughout this entire movie. So it's just one of those things. It might play better to a bigger audience than it might have done for me. But I just kind of felt like I've seen some of this stuff. Some of it didn't totally work for me. Like I said, I think when they focused on these characters, the character work was so good, and that's what carried the movie for me. I love horror as a genre. I love horror as a setting. I loved the setting here. But I think that I don't think it was a scary movie. They said there's moments of jump scares that will maybe make you jump in your seat.
It's more of an unsettling movie.
Yeah, and I when it does lean into just being kind of generally unsettling, I think that's where it really shines. Like I find that much more fascinating than Pennywise just
jumping out somewhere,
jumping at the camera, and just certain things. I like atmosphere. But that's where I think it shines, and it does do that in spades here and there. I wish that they did more of that and less of here's Pennywise jumping at the camera, and then we cut to the next scene, and boom, it happens again, boom, it happens in the next scene, stuff like that.
That's where you can really. That's where the cinematography and the makeup work and the set design and all the little intricacies that go into making a good movie. When they start focusing less on jump scares and they start focusing more on cinematography and all that other stuff, that's where it really stands out. It's where you can really appreciate like I said, you can appreciate the cinematography and all the extra work that went into it, because it doesn't take a lot of work for a jump scare, but it takes a lot of work to convey an unsettling feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's probably I'm biting at the bit to talk about some spoilers.
I'm on board with that. So here we go. Full spoilers from this point on for It 2017. It.
There's a pretty big departure from the get-go. It bites his arm right off, man. Right there in the beginning.
Yeah, and no, I think this is a departure in the sense that it's a departure from the miniseries. If I recall correctly, I think this is part of in the book. I mean, the book itself is much more graphic, much more mature, much more adult in many ways.
That poor little kid. Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I was definitely kind of like, oh shit, I kind of forgot this was rated R. Like I had pretty much just watched the miniseries before I kind of drove up and saw this, so I was still kind of in that, like I said, the miniseries does touch on some of these themes, and it does get dark here and there, but it's very much held back by the TV medium, whereas this is rated R. We're not going to hold back. So, these kids are dropping F-bombs left and right, yeah, but this fucking little kid just got his arm bit off by a monster clown that just turned into a thing with like 19 rows of teeth that are all sharp as hell. Like, I was just like, okay, all right, this is different.
Yes. The CGI, I thought that there were points, especially with maybe like the exposure of the teeth and stuff like that. I thought that was a little iffy. But I thought they did a good job of using practical effects and CG. What was the budget on their CG and all that stuff?
I've seen this estimated around $35 million, which I have to say, I mean, granted, $35 million is not chump change by any stretch of the imagination, but in the scheme of Hollywood and stuff like that, that's pretty low budget. I mean, horror movies, I guess, tend to have smaller budgets anyway, so it's not surprising that it would be low like this. But I think that for the money that they had available to them, I think that the effects work here is pretty admirable. There's a couple of things like Stanley sees this kind of a woman with kind of a fucked up face in a painting.
It's more of like an abstract art kind of thing. She's got like a long, windy face and stuff.
Design of that, I kind of felt it was a little too CG looking.
No, that was certainly CG looking. I'm referring to when his, particularly at the end when he's extending his arms and everything else, he extends himself from the body of a little boy, which it has CG in it. Don't get me wrong, but and it might. It looked like it was practical effects the way they were.
Stuff like that. Like I mean, that's what I was kind of talking about, where it leans into this version of Pennywise just being. Just unnatural, contorting himself and
coming out of the fucking refrigerator.
Yeah, like he's compressed in this refrigerator, and then he just kind of unwinds himself and snaps himself back into place. And I loved that. Like I wanted to see more of that.
Yes, it was very good.
And to be fair, we kind of see these sequences of each character is facing their biggest fear, so it kind of takes on these different forms. And so Eddie sees a leper and.
Beverly, though, was getting molested by her father. That one was powerful. That was.
I mean, and they did it in a way that a lot of this movie didn't have to show you everything to kind of make you feel things. Like I said, I think it when it oozed the atmosphere, when it oozes tension, I think that's where it excelled with the horror elements instead of being in your face with. Let me jump in front of the camera and laugh or scream and make loud noises. Like when it pulled back from that, I think that's where the horror elements were awesome. There's like a cool little visual when they're in this house that I guess where it resides, and it's like there's the 3 doors that pop up, and it's like not scary, very scary, or the scariest, or something like that. And then they just open one of the the not scary door, and it's just like this, looks like a body heavy girl. It's just like missing her legs, and it's like, kind of like it's just a brief moment. It's not really a jump scare, I don't think. It's just kind of like oh geez, what's going on here?
Right.
Just like little moments of that, and stuff like that. Like that's where I love that the part where Pennywise, he gets like Bev stabs him like kind of in the face, and then it kind of just like becomes more grotesque looking, and just stuff like that. Like I enjoyed that. Like I wanted more of that, and
the comedy laid out by Finn or Richie Tozier. Finn laid out some excellent comedy. That little kid is hilarious.
I said, I mean, the banter between all the kids felt supernatural. Not supernatural, just super space natural. Unless it was supernatural. There's a lot of supernatural shit going on here, so maybe that was it as well. There was just the kids really kind of sold this thing for me, and Rich, I agree. Richie is like, oh, now I got to kill this fucking clown. Like just moments like this, like these kids are so good in this role, and so. That kind of brings me to kind of something that I wanted to save for the spoiler section, and that's the movie ends. We get a title card, It, Chapter 1. Now, how did your audience kind of react when they saw that? Was there any audible reaction? Do you recall?
Yeah. So I sat when we got there. I got there a little late. So I sat in the back right corner of the theater. And there were probably 3 rows behind me. And there were a set of people that were very vocal the entire movie. And they were obnoxious most of the movie. They did make me laugh a couple of times. But there at the end, they all just went kind of nuts. Like, oh! I mean, they were screaming and yelling and everything else. And that was the reception in the whole movie, or it was the reception at the end. They, like I said, they went nuts. It was, I know in the second one, in the second, or not this, I guess the second part of the series, in the 90s version, they come back as adults. I'm curious to see who they cast, and if it follows similar tropes. And because throughout the entire movie, the adults didn't recognize or didn't see the things that were tormenting the children. So I'm curious to see how those things carry on into the adult version of these children's lives.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see that as well. Now, what I find interesting about this is both the book and the miniseries. They follow an alternating timeline throughout the entire thing. So yes, there is a loose part 1 of the miniseries is largely focused on the kids. Part 2 is largely focused on the adults coming back to Derry to face it again. But it's all stitched together with a frame story of in the I guess the present or the 1980s, which when in the miniseries. That's kind of the later timeline where they're adults, and it's the 50s, when they're kids, and they've kind of aged. They kind of moved the time periods here to the 80s for when they're kids, so that it'll be close to modern day times when they do the sequel to this as when they're adults. So by the nature of the way the book's written, it kind of bounces back and forth, and we see just kind of little slices of life of here's when Ben was a new kid in school, and here's when Ben met Bev, and here's just these little bits and pieces of these kids kind of gradually come together, and it's kind of spliced between their adults kind of interacting, or it's back. We've got to get back to Derry. It's kind of that. So it gradually kind of bounces back and forth between these two timelines, and there's a lot of alignment between the two. There's a lot of thematic similarities, and there's a lot of oh shit, I remember what happened. So it's interesting that they kind of chose to make this in a way where it's a very linear timeline versus the way the novel and the miniseries are constructed, where it's very meticulously crafted to have these alternate timelines. I mean, basically, in the miniseries, we see like a brief 1 minute segment of Ben's an adult. Okay, so he's an architect. He's not fat anymore. He's wealthy, and then we flash back, and then we see Ben as a kid. But we've been informed by what we've seen as an adult. So we have that framework already, and so that kind of so when you go back and see them as kids, you're thinking about where they ended up as an adults and stuff like that. And not only that, but it's also kind of one of those things. The inherent framework of the story is, well, they're coming back as adults. So when you make a movie where it's 7 kids and they're kids the whole time, it's kind of just like, well, none of them are going to die, right? And of course, they don't have to be 100% beholden to the novel. They could very much just make this an iteration of it. But when I always kind of figured in the back of my mind, I was like, of course this movie is going to do gangbusters. So of course that, it was like there's almost a lack of stakes, and I was kind of just like, I wonder if they deliberately will change things just to not be 100% beholden to the source material here, which isn't always sometimes it's a good move. Sometimes it's going to piss a lot of your fans off, but
right.
So I found it interesting that they chose to do this linear timeline with just the kids, and I thought they did a great job of filling in the gaps, because like I said, we kind of see bits and pieces of their lives as kids, but we don't see it's not a continuous period of time. And I guess this one does kind of cut between months here and there, but it still very much feels like this thing happens, so then this next thing happens, and then this next thing happens, and it's not like jumping around.
Yeah, no, I actually forgot. See, I mean, I actually forgot that it did that.
It's because it made you forget.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Well, I guess
the deadlights that got to you.
The deadlights that make you forget. So I was very much engrossed in the characters.
Yeah, and so it does make me wonder. And rewatching the miniseries, part 2 is far worse than part 1, because the adults aren't as compelling as the kids. And I don't know if that's a symptom of the story itself, if it's a symptom of the casting, the way that the arc plays out with them. So they've already announced that they're working on a sequel to this, obviously. You wouldn't put it chapter 1 and then be like, oops.
That's all you get.
So I think they're obviously very confident, and clearly they're being rewarded with the box office receipts so far. But I'm curious to see if they can maintain the quality and the camaraderie I think that they've established with these kids. And I think that the director, Andy Muschietti, I think he's kind of already said on the record that these kids will at least appear in some form, flashbacks, however it ends up being, and that's the right call to make, I think.
Well, you're already going to be staked in them in a previous movie.
Exactly. So I mean, so I think that it could be an interesting reversal of the kind of how the miniseries and I think how the book is framed, in that we see the adults are the frame story where, okay, this is our context, where now the kids are the context, and now we kind of reverse it, and we kind of see where they end up. And we're informed by where they are with their kids. We've seen where they are. We've seen kind of how they grew together initially. Now we can kind of see them coming back together and kind of maybe reverting back to their childlike states, and how that kind of informs their behavior from that point.
I think that it'll be easier to make a better part 2.
It's not hard. I can assure you.
Yeah, well, maybe not. I don't know. It's been a long time.
The stuff with Pennywise in part 2, I think, is excellent. It's kind of the resolution of it, and I said I think that the adults themselves just aren't compelling. I think a lot of it was the casting, particularly, but it could be other things. There's things in it that are fine. Also, there's this animatronic spider thing at the end of part 2 that looks fucking terrible.
See, I don't even remember it. That's how bad it is, I suppose.
So they probably won't do that again. They might have some sort of spider creature thing, but yeah, whatever that say. That was, I think that was very much held back by the budget and the medium, as we've kind of mentioned before. So, yeah, I'm excited for a part 2. And a part of me kind of like I say, I enjoy these kids. It's got a very Stranger Things aesthetic and feel to it, which is no coincidence given how much Stranger Things is informed by Stephen King novels in general.
I would like to shout out my favorite thing in the whole movie. They go to Ben's room to try to get the backstory on the town and where possibly it is coming from, and this, that, and the other, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's a Beverly closes his door,
yeah,
and they do this whole New Kids on the Block little segment where it was Oh, it was excellent. It was
It's
so
just like
good.
it's like 2 seconds where it just it kicks in, and then she just like slowly moves the door back.
It was
Yeah.
so awesome. It was very good.
Like I said, there's a lot of little touches in this movie that it's just like
It's just a lot of style, man. There's a lot of style.
there's style, there's a vision behind this project. It's not trying to cash in on the concept. I think you really could have. I mean, this movie could have gone terribly, really.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that it's a little, almost a small miracle that it came together in the way that it did. But I mean, this was an excellent movie. So,
And looking at the cast, I'm actually, especially with the director of cinematography, and well, I didn't really know much of the cast besides Bill Skarsgård, and I'm not a real big fan of Bill Skarsgård. But when you give him a role like Pennywise, and you look at the previous iteration of Pennywise, it's like those are pretty big shoes to fill.
right.
But the biggest thing is the cinematography for me. And I think that's a trend. I tend to value that. But the movie was just shot, and it had so much character, and it was very good.
I remembered there's a part where I guess Bev's kind of in his little hidey hole, and he does this little dancing number for her.
Yes.
And the way that it's shot, like I guess it's fixed on his head, and then the camera kind of shakes around, and I've never seen anything like it before. Just the way that was.
Yeah, he's like rotating his shoulders and moving his feet and everything.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm describing it in a way that really kind of does it any form of justice. Oh, I know I'm not, but
No, well that's the best way to talk about it. It's fixed on his head, and then the rest of the camera shakes with the rest of his body, and he's doing this dancing motion. And so the background and his body and everything is moving around the fixture of his head.
and it's not like. I mean, I guess it is unnatural for your head to be so still, but that's another one of those things that's just like something just genuinely unnerving about that. And if you just shot that with him dancing, it'd kind of be like, oh, that might, I don't know, would that play well? It might be kind of just goofy, and obviously, he's trying to be a little bit of a goofball in that just to kind of freak her out even more, but just this, that's just one little thing right there that, they shoot something like that, and it's just like, they get it.
Yeah. How would you rank this movie? Would you recommend people go see this?
Well, just a refresher, our rating scale is go see it in the theater, wait for the Blu-ray, wait for Netflix, or wait for someone to pay you to see it. And I feel like we recommend a lot of people go see things in the theater, but I think we've had a pretty good track record in Humans Aside, so go see this in the theater. Go see this in IMAX if you can. I didn't get to see it in IMAX.
Is it in IMAX?
Yeah, it is. In certain spots, so I think I might go see it in IMAX again. Yeah.
Oh damn! I wish I would have known it was an IMAX. Otherwise, I probably would have made. I don't think I could. My schedule would have allowed me to go see it in IMAX.
To say we're on a compressed timeline
with Irma, but it's really good. It's an experience.
It's really good.
And the cinematography and just the overall atmosphere of the movie makes it an experience worth having on a large screen with a great sound system. It's very good.
I concur. And in case you haven't gotten enough of us talking about it, this is a good time for me to mention again Ink to Film. Luke and James, that's a podcast. They're going to cover a book. They're going to read through it, kind of recap it, tell their experiences about it while they read it, and then they're going to go see a movie that's associated with it, offer their takes on what they liked in the movie, what they compare it to the book. I think it's a very unique perspective, and something that, at least in terms of it is kind of the first thing that they've really covered. They are going to offer a much more unique perspective in terms of kind of relating it to the book than we have. I think we've probably done a pretty good job of banging on about things that we really liked in the film itself. But if you really want a kind of another perspective on the movie, I definitely check those guys out. I'll go ahead and include a link to their website in the episode description here. It's going to be inktofilm.com, which is pretty easy to remember. I think they're at Ink2Film on Twitter as well. You can find them on Facebook. All the helpful links are going to be in there on their website, and those guys are awesome. And they're going to be doing Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick next. That's going to be their next big project. And of course, some of you might know that was kind of the loose inspiration for Blade Runner. So they're going to be talking the original 1980s Blade Runner, and then they're going to be tackling Blade Runner 2049 when that drops in October, and that's something I think that both Andrew and I are very much looking forward to as well. So I will definitely be listening to Ink to Film because I have never read that. I mean, I think it's a short story. Yeah, it's a short story. So I'm curious to kind of get a read on that, and then really kind of how it ties into the larger Blade Runner mythos and kind of what was adapted. Obviously, kind of it said it's a loosely inspired. So I'm very keen to kind of hear their thoughts and check that out. So,
what have you been up to this week?
I guess the only other thing that I've really been up to is I'm trying to finish out the Uncharted series on PlayStation. So back when Uncharted 4 came out, and I think I want to say March of last year, maybe. I don't remember. I went back and I played Uncharted 1 and 2, and then I started 3, and then I never finished 3, and so by extension, I never even played 4. I bought 4 at launch, and I never played it, which that's a problem I have with many games. So the Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, which is kind of an extended DLC, just came out for Uncharted 4. So I picked that up too, of course, and I kind of told myself, all right, I did this once with Uncharted 4. I have to go back and play these games again. So I'd actually played Uncharted 3 back when it came out on PS3, but I just beat the other day Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception, and that's an awesome game. I think all those games are awesome. I mean, Uncharted 2, I think of the 3 that I've played is fantastic. That's definitely the high point of the series so far, but I love the characters in it. Nate Drake, Sully, Elena, Chloe, those just a awesome set of characters, great voice acting, and very fun set pieces and gunplay. I think it's just a really badass series.
It's a very cinematographic game. It's very much like a movie.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's a cinematic experience. It's an extended cinematic experience that you get to play with, and it's cool. So I'm gonna dive into whenever. I'm going to wait until I see what happens with the power outages potentially, but whenever I get power extended for the long haul, I think I'm going to dive into Uncharted 4, finally play that, and then hopefully I will then go on to play The Lost Legacy. Yeah, so that'll eat up some time for a good while, and I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, I kind of dropped the ball when Uncharted 4 came out, so it's time for me to
pick it back up.
Yeah, exactly. So what about you?
I haven't really been up to a whole lot. No, I've been playing a lot of that Mario Rabbids game, which is pretty good. I haven't touched XCOM 2 since last time we spoke.
Yeah, well, as I said, and we are recording on a short week, so
that's right.
We haven't had the luxury of a weekend for you to really kind of devote your free time to. So
yeah, I think that's about it. Really, I haven't been doing a whole lot, so I'm a little dry on this segment, but
that's okay. Like I say, it happens. You don't always have things to talk about. What's your Game of Thrones progress update? Yeah,
I'm still in season 6.
Okay, we'll probably have a bit of an extended period before we get a chance to record our next episode. So, if you're caught up with season 7, then we'll get a chance to talk about that. But all right.
That's it, man. Thanks for everybody tuning in, and I hope everybody gets through this hurricane if you happen to reside in Florida, especially South Florida, and tune in for next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Credit over to Kevin MacLeod for the title track, Mechanolith. That's licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. You can find us at watchreviewrepeat.com. You're going to find all your handy-dandy links there. You can find us on Facebook there, our Twitter handle. You're going to find our iTunes, Google Play feeds, everything you'll ever need to get in touch with us, find out where to listen to our podcast, even though you're listening to it right now, probably now. Give us a subscription, give us a review, anything like that. Greatly appreciated. Any feedback over to our Gmail account at watchreviewrepeat@gmail.com. We'd love to hear anything if you guys saw it. Did you agree with us? Did you disagree with us? Anything like that? Favorite Pennywise moments, maybe? So I guess that'll do it.
Be sure to tune in next week for one of my favorite directors' movies. Comes out next week. We're going to be covering it. It's Mother. So
Yep, Darren Aronofsky's mother.
you have that to look forward to.
Yeah, I have absolutely no idea what to expect that movie. So I'm
Either
looking
do
forward
I.
to covering. So yeah, that'll be fun. So all right, well until next week, I've been Colton.
I'm Andrew. Have a
I'm
good
still
night.
Colton, just for the record. Okay, I guess we'll see you next week. Stay safe, guys.